That night, a knock on the door changed my life in a way I never imagined possible. Every weekend my dad went fishing. It began when Dad married my stepmother, Sophia, and I was frequently left at home with her as a sideline in his new life. Although we were not close, we also did not despise one another. Sophia was always able to act appropriately. Men would find a kind lady to be calming, while women would either be envious of or cautious of her. The home seemed oddly silent that night. There was simply the sound of the wall clock ticking and the wind coming through the window, snow, TV, or kitchen water. After tidying up the stack of papers for my presentation, I sat in my room. A knock on the door interrupted my plans to switch on YouTube and watch a video to help me decompress. Softly, as though the knocker wasn't sure if he should, I pivoted, and there was silence, but suddenly a voice, barely audible, spoke. "Are you sleeping, Dylan?" My stepmother, Sophia, was there. I pulled the door open. Wearing a flimsy robe, she stood with her hair down. She appeared to have been sobbing since her eyes were a bit red. "Are you all right?" I inquired. She gave a very quiet smile. "Not able to sleep. Do you mind if I sit with you for a bit?" I gave a rather ashamed nod. "Nick." She entered and took a seat on the windowside chair. A weird light, gentle but not warm, dropped on her face from the nightlight. In the past, I would sit with my mother if I couldn't fall asleep. We would discuss various topics while eating cake. She peered out the window. "There is no one now." I kept quiet. I was unsure of how to respond. She was definitely depressed. However, a lovely but depressed woman, sitting in my room in the middle of the night, made the tension feel oppressive. "Dylan. She turned and stared at me. "How do you feel about me?" I was quite taken aback. What are you saying? Do you fear me?" I gave a rather perplexed shake of my head. "No, I'm really friendly." Sophia chuckled uncontrollably. "Friendly. No one has the courage to say it, even though it seems risky." She got up and moved in closer. Her hand was on my shoulder, delicately stroking but not pressing. "If I'm causing you any discomfort, I apologize. Simply put, I haven't had someone to chat to in a long time." "You get it?" Unable to comprehend, I nodded. A few minutes later, she walked out of the room. Just a glance, no good night or hello. It's difficult to describe. All night long, I was unable to sleep. Sophia appeared to have altered by the next morning. As usual, preparing breakfast was cheerful. She made no reference to the previous evening. I was afraid to inquire, yet I couldn't forget that hazy shoulder contact. It lingered in my mind, like a melody. It resonated more the more I tried to forget. When my father went for his next fishing trip 3 days later, Sophia showed up at my door once more, this time without knocking. After 2 knocks, she opened the door and entered. "Are you a movie buff?" I raised my head from my computer. "Yes, what's the matter? Want to see an old one with me? It's not particularly well known, but it's really wonderful." After some hesitation, I nodded. The film was eerie, lovely, and melancholy. However, Sophia's touch on my thigh during a silent scene is what I will never forget, not the film. Not touching, not responding. Simply sitting there, as though it had always been there. I have no idea what's happening. Is she genuinely searching for anything, or is she just testing me? What am I thinking too? Sophia didn't say anything at the end of the film. She just got up, gathered her belongings, and faced me. "I appreciate you sitting with me. Sometimes it's enough to have someone at my side." I was left with an unresolved question when she went. Was it a dream? I gazed at the ceiling that night. Sleep arrived slowly and with jolts. Sophia sat in the window chair and had a dream, but this time, she didn't weep. She grinned. An odd smile. Emotions are peculiar entities. They never make a loud noise that goes too far. Like raindrops seeping through a wall, They simply flow into us until we're wet and realize it's too late. Sophia stopped keeping her distance after that movie night together. She frequently showed up, sometimes under false pretenses, asking if I wanted to eat, asking for assistance, changing the TV remote, drawing the curtains, and doing whatever else she could. But she always asked by ringing my doorbell. And each time I opened the door, I wanted to hear her shout my name, Dylan, not out of courtesy. She spoke in a long, quiet voice that was like a whisper. Instead of a name, it sounded like someone summoning the past. It was pouring softly that day. It was a dreary day. Sophia knocked on the door with a little metal box in her hand, just as I was ready to leave my room. "Are you up for a game?" I was shocked when I glanced up. "Game?" She grinned and said, "Truth or dare." But the adult version. Not the sensual type. I nodded, more like running away from my sanity. I had no idea why. The living room was where we sat. The illumination was low. We all had a glass of red wine. I was given a metal box by Sophia. There were pieces of folded paper within. She had written a challenge for each item. The guidelines are straightforward. You must respond honestly if you select truth. I'll present you with a challenge if you select dare. Alternate. Don't, skip, dot. I took a swallow. My heart was pounding rapidly, as if something uncontrollable was going to happen. I went with truth on my first turn. Have you ever been genuinely in love with someone? I grinned in embarrassment. I then gave a nod. Yes, once, but I never had the courage to say it. Because you don't own that individual. Sophia gave me a longer glance than normal. She then produced a sheet of paper. Dare was her choice. I was challenged to think, but I couldn't think of anything. Dare I tell you a secret that no one has ever known? I blurted out at the end. She raised her head. There was a lengthy stillness, and her eyes fell like the surface of a lake after a breeze. I shared a home with a man 16 years my senior, when I was 18. He was my instructor. I believed it to be love. In reality, though, I was really a tool he employed to make up for the gap in my marriage. I sat still. Everything seems to freeze around me. After sipping her wine, Sophia turned to face me. I used to believe that people would retain me if I was nice enough, obedient enough, and kind enough. However, it turns out that all someone wants is a device that folds up when not in use. After a few rounds, the game was over. Nobody was victorious or defeated. Sophia, however, muttered behind me as I got up to empty the glasses. "Thank you, Dylan. I haven't been the one being watched for so long." That night, Sophia's narrative kept repeating in my brain like a slow-motion movie, and I couldn't sleep, so I simply nodded, unsure of how to react. A part of me wanted to be there to protect her from her past traumas, and another part felt sad for her. I was unaware that I was slipping beyond the edge, and Sophia did nothing to stop me. Sophia avoided me 3 days after the truth or dare evening. There were no more recognizable knocks on the door, or kind looks in the morning. I felt as though I had done something wrong, but I couldn't tell what it was. She vanished inside this very house. Perhaps I should have given her a hug that day, or at least held her hand, but would that have been too much? She told me about the past, and I remained mute. Sophia had been home since lunchtime, but she had not left her room when I went past it on Friday afternoon, when my father returned home late for another meeting. My hand was hovering in front of the door when her voice spoke, but it wasn't loud, so I paused before knocking. "Come in." I was shocked. Not gentle, but loud enough for me to hear. Was she aware of my presence? The door opened, and I entered the room, which was lighted by a desk lamp and had a lavender scent. Sophia was laying on her side on the bed, her eyes a little red and her hair a little unkempt. I said, a bit bewildered, "I was going to knock. But you don't have to do that anymore, right?" I was at a loss for words. She sat up, bringing the cover to her breast, and the ash-gray silk nightgown was still there. I glanced at her and realized that statement wasn't only for her. Sophia called me over, pointing to the side of the bed. You know, Dylan, sometimes people are exhausted, not because of the body, but because of the things they have to pretend not to feel. I took a seat on the edge, keeping a safe distance. She gazed at me for a while before whispering, I used to wonder if anybody would miss me if I left one day. I swallowed. I would. I spoke in a quiet, unshakable voice. Sophia grinned, her eyes sparkling with something more profound than tears, perhaps loneliness. Dylan, you're better than I imagined. She grasped my hand tenderly, not too firmly, but just enough so I could feel the invitation, the warmth, and the pulse. No one said anything more, but she tilted her head, her forehead resting on my shoulder, and I squeezed, even though I knew I should draw back. I stood up to depart, but Sophia drew me back with a kind voice. We sat like that, two lonely people leaning on each other in a home too silent to be safe. I can't sleep, so please stay for just 10 minutes. I paused, then sat back closer this time. She put her head on my lap as though it were a harmless gesture, but my heart wasn't convinced. 10 minutes went by. After that, nobody slept. I caressed her hair, softly, without intention or calculation, and no one closed their eyes. It was only an automatic reaction. Neither she nor I spoke. I had a dream about a door that night, but it was just ajar, and as I tried to open it wider, another hand stopped me. I heard the inquiry from behind the door, but I couldn't see the other person's face. Are you sure you'll be able to come back if you go through? Sophia had returned to her room, and I woke up in the dark, alone with the sound of the wind outside the window. There are things that should only stop at feelings, because if we go any further, we might lose the last precious thing. Trust Jay. The next morning, I discovered a little piece of paper penned in blue ink beneath my door. I grabbed the paper, read it many times, and then, not daring to respond, put it in the drawer. I'm not sure what prompted her to write that, but I felt both relieved and let down. We were on the verge of falling in love, but sometimes that's the farthest a two-person relationship can go. It was an autumn night, and although it wasn't pouring, I was. No one looked at me as Sophia, with her normal kind smile and a brief hug, sent my father off to the vehicle after a longer than usual 3-day work trip. It was all so conventional, even phony, and nobody asked a question. The door shut. When the automobile started, the room was as quiet as water, and I didn't leave until over 1,000 p.m. My head felt heavy, and my stomach was starving. I went to the kitchen and noticed Sophia standing in front of the window with the yellow light bouncing off her cheekbones and nose bridge. She was wearing a long black silk dress and was so stunning that it made my heart skip a beat even without makeup. She smiled and said, "Are you hungry, Angetta?" She gestured to the table, and I nodded, stunned. I had made cheese bread. "I'm not sure whether you enjoy it." She poured wine instead of eating, and I sat down thinking this situation was staged. It was redder than usual this time. I ate slowly, and she drank slowly. After I finished, she got up with a second glass of wine and asked, "Do you want to go up and watch a movie, or?" We didn't say much, but our eyes kept meeting. After a little pause, she said, "Just sit for a while." I got up and nodded. I hesitated as she led me directly to her room rather than the living area. "It's all right. I trust you," she said, turning around. It was a simple phrase, but it caused my barriers to crumble. Tonight was different from the last one, with the same lavender scent and yellow lighting. Sophia sat near the bed, looking away as though thinking over something. "Dylan, sure." I took the same seat in the window chair. "Have you ever pondered what we may be in addition to our roles?" I hesitated, my heart thumping, and honestly responded, "I don't know. However, I understand. I wish to keep you safe." She grinned. A melancholy grin. "Dylan, you are not in need of protecting. Nobody should have to defend someone like you." Subsequently, she rose and moved closer and closer until I could smell her hairknot perfume. but the aroma of human flesh, a pillow, and a night who had no escape. I put my hand on hers when she raised hers and touched my chest without exerting any pressure or purpose. We stood there like that, like two souls attempting to close their eyes and cross the line, and she murmured, "Can I give you a hug once?" I don't know why, no calculation. I gave a nod, and we shared a long, long embrace. Nobody spoke again, but she used her hands, breath, and gaze to hold me back just as I was ready to pull away, and this time I didn't stop. Everything was hot, hazy, and smelled of flesh, and I only recalled a sensation of being drawn into a vortex, sinking deeper the more I tried. After everything had subsided, she laid next to me with her head resting on my chest. We didn't speak, it was simply skin-to-skin contact and unwavering eye contact. "If tonight were the last time, would you regret it?" She murmured gently, almost inaudibly, as the nightlight cast a warm glow about us, like a quiet picture frame. A shiver went down my spine as I gripped my hands, but I said, "No, I only regret not coming sooner." I went asleep without seeing it, but before I closed my eyes, I noticed a little flashing light in the corner of the room. She didn't respond, but her breathing was gentle, like amusement, like approval. I was awakened at around 6 in the morning by a dim red glow, similar to that of a flashlight or camera. Sophia was gone. The blankets were wrinkled and still warm, but there were no other signs, as if last night had been a dream, I realized to the faint sound of my alarm clock blaring through the partially closed door. My brain still spinning from what had occurred or was occurring, I slipped my shirt back on and left her room, looking across the living room on my way back to my own room. It felt weird to be seen. She was either awake, or had been awake for a long time since the kitchen light was still on, and the glass of wine from yesterday was still half full on the bar when I touched it, and it felt cold. I was about to turn away when the flickering light reappeared. I was right, and I squatted down to get a better look at the little red dot in the corner of the room between the Bluetooth speaker and the fake flower vase. I took a step back as if someone had just hit me in the face when I noticed for the first time a little camera, the type you can get online, hidden in the speaker with a very weak red light. When she told me depressing stories, she always picked a moment when my father wasn't home. So I walked back to my room, shut the door, and sat down on the bed to attempt to put it all together. The first time she said to remain for just 10 minutes. Perceptive eyes. Now, the camera. Sophia was an expert. Sophia hardly showed up during the day, so I walked to the kitchen and didn't see her. It was dark when she returned, and I was sitting by the window in the living room, which was tidy, spotless, and even vacant. She held a paper bag from the bakery and grinned a little. "Do you want macaroons?" I nodded without meeting her gaze, but I sensed a shift. The warmth had vanished. Rather, there was a terrifying attentiveness, as if someone had just completed a role. Sophia didn't knock on the door or invite me over for dinner that evening. At 2:00 a.m., she left me alone, but I was unable to fall asleep. Her light was out, but the door was slightly ajar, as though it had been left open on purpose, and I stood there for nearly a minute. Someone seemed to be waiting for me to enter the trap behind that door, but I chose to leave a little piece of paper tucked into the door's crack instead. Was it a test, or was last night real? There was no answer, and when I got up the following day, I found the piece of paper placed neatly on my room's desk, folded in 4, and opened it. One sentence, written in the same blue ink. "You responded, didn't you?" I trembled, and I began to avoid Sophia from that point on. I avoided any stares and any sign of contact. I had no idea where I had gone wrong, but I did know that I was no longer in charge of this tale. My father came home early the next weekend. He was cheerful and sporting new fishing equipment, yet he scowled at me. "You, very thin. Do you eat healthily at home?" Sophia interrupted me as I was ready to nod, saying, "Yes, he is. Has just been a bit moody lately." Her voice was as soft as cotton, yet it landed on my chest like a stone. My father stared at me for a long time without saying anything more. "Staying up late," not sleeping, like if he's concealing something. I think Sophia muttered something behind my back, and I felt like screaming as I watched my father answer the phone that night while doing the dishes, murmur something, and then turn to face me. After dinner, Sophia poured my father another glass of wine and grinned at me, saying, "Perhaps we should be more careful about what happens in the house." Another part simply wanted to vanish. Now everyone has a camera, don't they? My father chuckled, assuming it was a joke, but I realized it was a quiet warning when I nearly spilled my drink. I took out the camera from my room that evening. I had no idea it was there. It was concealed in an old electrical socket behind the drapes. I just knew one thing, so I'm not sure if it was a fear, a cable leading outdoors, or batteries. Sophia was in charge of the recording, and 3 days after our most recent supper, I got a text message from an unidentified number. "Do you believe that I have no friends at school? Well done. You're a stepmother." I stood still in the dormitory corridor. A video clip was attached, my heart thumping in my chest, my hands trembling like a person suffering from malaria. I knew what it was. I didn't need it, and I didn't open it. The academic supervisor summoned me into the office an hour later, and the light was white, and the space was frigid. I sat across from 2 lecturers, but none of them inquired or smiled. I didn't dispute, but the vice principal's voice sounded like a sledgehammer since it has impacted the school's reputation and the learning environment. "We need to clarify something." The video didn't show my face, but it did show the incident, and I just sat there without denying anything. No one questioned why there was a camera or who was recording, but it revealed me in my voice. "You did that to your family?" They questioned me. "Are you aware of what the law states? Are you aware of your age?" I was unable to speak. Every syllable I came out of my lips was hooked and drew blood. The suspension email was waiting for me when I returned to my room, so I contacted my dad. No compassion. "Is it true that the phone rang 6 times before he answered?" I wanted to say no, you're being set up, but there was only a chilly, steely statement with no welcome or question. I heard a long, choking sigh, yet he knew that my throat was dry. At 10 p.m., I stepped in front of the house and said, "Go home now." Hez in his office. Sophia answered the door without any surprise, wrath, or anything else, just a gaze that made me feel as though I were someone who didn't exist. My father sat at the table with his hands on a file and his eyes red, and her speech sounded even more like she was reciting a script. Perhaps from tears, perhaps from rage. I sat down. "What do you have to say?" I didn't realize the camera was there, so I opened my lips, but all that came out was a faint whisper, followed by a beat of quiet. "When did it start?" he then inquired. He nodded slowly, and I didn't respond. "It couldn't be. Sophia said that you started it, and she felt threatened even though she didn't want this to go on. Felt that correct?" "What did she say?" I screamed as I leaped to my feet. "Sit down and don't be a fuss," he said, holding up his hand. I stared at him, trembling all over. "She's not what you believe." My heart was bursting, and my throat was burning. He chuckled cruelly. "You don't understand. You know, people always say that when they have no way back." I left and ran without turning around or crying, simply feeling the wind on my cheeks and wondering, why did you do that to me? I packed everything and departed the following morning, but neither my father nor Sophia were there to say goodbye. I didn't know where I was heading, and nobody stopped me until the neighbor's stray dog arrived and nipped my jeans before running off. I remained at an old friend's house in a little room beneath a tin roof, hot and filled with the sound of a fan, while my phone rang nonstop from unknown numbers. All I knew was that I had just been booted out of my own life. The texts were filled with taunts, sarcasm, and harassment. Nobody inquired about my feelings or the truth of what had transpired. They didn't know that I was asking myself the same question every night while laying in the dark and staring at the ceiling as though searching for a breach to fall through. The same line kept coming up, repeated from friends to strangers. "You did that to your stepmother." When I was buying instant noodles at the store near my dorm one Saturday afternoon, I noticed Sophia, who was dressed like a model from the weekend newspaper in a white blouse, long pants, and sunglasses. I didn't call my father, and he didn't search for me. They giggled as a strange gray-haired man pushed a cart full of fancy cuisine next to her, his hand resting intimately on her back. At the end of the counter, I remained motionless, not out of jealousy, but because I knew she had lost nothing, that she had not been buried online, condemned, or expelled. I should have turned away, but instead, I took a step back, and all the anguish had landed on me. Sophia gazed at me as she turned her head. She had a kind grin on her face, but her eyes were neither surprised or scared. "Oh, Dylan, are you okay?" I clenched my fists, trying to contain my anger. "What? I didn't start it, you know. You're the one, you know that." "Still even," she broke off, "you should be careful with your words. Without proof, certain ideas are only conjecture, and if there's evidence, they become irrational." I gazed at her without blinking. "What do you suppose I did?" Sophia inclined her head, smiling like she was speaking to a kid, and the man next to her started to appear irritated. "Seduced. Set up. Are you certain you didn't love every second spent with me? Dylan, you are a participant, not a victim." I wanted to add that she videotaped it and that she was aware of what she was doing, but I knew that if I spoke, I would be the one who lost control. She moved closer, speaking loud enough for me alone to hear. "Don't be stupid," since that's precisely what she anticipated. "You should learn how to withstand being pulled underwater. I know the rules." Then she turned away, gracefully and tenderly, as if she had never been in my life. The voice was Sophia's, but deeper and more irate, and she declared, "He may betray me, but I will make him know what it means to lose everything, even his most beloved son," in an anonymous text message that night. That was an old tape. My heart ached a bit more every time I listened to that section again. My father had an affair and had gone. Sophia never liked me, and my mother had abandoned me like a piece of luggage that no one wanted to keep. I had no idea who provided the tape, but I was only a pawn, a means for her to kill the guy who had wronged her. I knew one thing, even though it may have been her ex or a mishap involving a misplaced phone. People just believe what they see on the TV, so even if I pulled out this footage, I wouldn't be able to clear my reputation. I spent the entire night lying on the tile floor. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, and didn't switch on the lights. I just kept saying the same thing in the dark. "It's true. It's true. It's true," but the more I say it, the more unsure I am. I no longer know who I am in other people's eyes. A week later, friends avoided me. No one talked to me at school, and I left the city out of survival instinct rather than choice. My inbox was filled with anonymous messages, slanderous colleges, and edited clips that were all over student forums. Some even secretly filmed me walking down the street, and then added the words, "Stepmother is public property" underneath. The teacher who had told me I had writing potential now just looked at me like I was a stain on a white sheet. Without conducting an investigation, the institution formally issued an indefinite suspension, citing a major impact on the academic community's safety and reputation rather than ethical concerns. They only had to clean up, and I was garbage. I spent some time back in my mother's hometown, a little place where few people were aware of the controversy, or, if they were, didn't give a damn. No one cared whether I wrote a flawless essay or aspired to be an investigative reporter, and I worked at a variety of odd tasks to earn a living, such as cleaning the warehouse, working in the kitchen, and installing cable. I slept on a folding chair beside the window at night, and I frequently woke up around 3 in the morning when the monsoon blew through the gaps in the wooden wall. Not because of nightmares, but because of a sense of emptiness, as though the Dylan part of me had vanished from my body, leaving behind a nameless, hollow shadow. I considered sharing the entire tale with someone at times, but I decided against it. I decided to remain and held her hand, no longer believing that anybody would believe me, since sometimes I didn't dare think that I was really innocent. I touched her, fell in love, and paid the price for playing a game without rules. When I last heard from an old acquaintance of my father's, he informed me that Sophia was now the owner of the house, and that everything had changed hands very fast. "The movie is over, my child," I said, smiling a little. "I heard your old man sold his share and moved abroad to live with a new person." After the lights went down, I was still the only one in the cinema, but the movie wasn't finished, it merely switched scenes. I happened to be using my old phone to browse the internet one day, when I noticed Sophia at a charity fundraiser. She was standing in the center of the platform, wearing a white dress, and holding a microphone as she spoke on the importance of faith and healing in the modern family, amid applause below. I wasn't upset when I saw the banner behind it that said, "Recovering from Trauma, the Journey of a Wife and Mother." I got up early every morning, jogged through the misty streets, and saw the first rays of dawn filter through the moist leaves, yet I no longer felt wounded, only empty. There are stains that are not supposed to be cleaned away, yet sometimes I spend hours sitting by the village pond, watching the fish splash and listening to the cicadas calling their mates. I try to fill my mind with fresh noises and pictures, like people burning incense to ward off spirits. The degree was suspended like an old clothing in a suitcase, and I hadn't gone back to school or applied anywhere else a year after the event. They are designed to be lived with. Not clean enough to wear again, but not horrible enough to throw away. I continued typing a few words each time I opened my laptop, not books, nor articles. Simple sentences, a few made-up phrases, and occasionally letters to no one. One day, when I was looking through some old books in the town library, I came across a folded newspaper with a picture of Sophia, who is currently the featured guest at the Ladies with the Strength to Overcome the Past panel, on the inside page. I didn't read the article. Instead, I spent a considerable amount of time staring at the picture, folded it carefully, and placed it between my notebook and an old map at the bottom of the bookshelf. She stood amid young businesswomen, her eyes full of confidence, her hair beautifully curled, her beige dress unwrinkled. The following day, a male voice from an unknown number called me. It was Horace, but it seemed familiar. "Dylan." I recognized the voice of my father's side grandpa, who claimed to have heard the story too late, after everything was over, and that my father had forgotten about me while living in France with a new bride. Claimed to still have my childhood photos. I accepted his invitation to tea when I was still calling Dad in a loud, booming voice, unaware that I would one day be cut off from the family. As we sat beneath the ancient bougainvillea trellis that day, each of us enjoying a piece of dry cake and a cup of ginger tea, Dad related stories of how my father had left school to follow a lady, then returned, and then left again. I listened to him without question or reproach. Some individuals, Dylan, are born to live a life free of repercussions. They commit crimes, and then turn their lives around, while the others must spend the rest of their lives cleaning up after themselves. I looked up. His eyes were dull, but not weak. The rest, however, truly deserved to live. Perhaps I was more like him than I realized. I returned to my room that evening, opened my laptop, and began composing, and for the first time in months, my words were unshakable. I was writing about a child named Elle, who at one point believed he was the main character, but was actually only a footnote in someone else's scheme. I wasn't writing about Sophia or my father, and lived, not to win, but to share the experience. A few weeks later, I ran across Hang, a high school classmate who had studied literature with me and whose name I nearly forgot. We spoke for a while, and she asked whether I still wrote after recognizing me in a little coffee shop in town where I sat every morning to write. "You still retain a piece of yourself," she replied with a genuine and kind grin when I answered yes. "That's fantastic." I nearly began crying when I read that statement, since I had been considering returning to college for a while and felt like I had nothing left to cling to. Perhaps I would attend a smaller school. Perhaps I would put in more work, but I would start afresh with a clearer brain, not to regain my reputation. Sophia, who is most likely still alive today, might not remember my name, but this time I would leave without someone grabbing my hand and dragging me in or forcing me out. I'm not upset anymore, really, because I've realized what's more important. I still have myself. Perhaps she's found someone else to trust and push me over the brink. I met Sophia again one late winter afternoon at a coffee shop on the outskirts of town where I had come to research an article on memory and the role of forgiveness. She was sitting in the deep corner of the shop next to the window, the sunlight gently slanting through her hair, which had a few silver strands. She was not whole. She was not clean, but she was still me with what was left after the storm passed. She looked up and noticed me, and I was no longer sure if I was looking at a lady who had destroyed my life or a ghost from the past that had never left. She was still sitting in the same position, back straight, knees crossed, hands turning the pages of a book softly, graceful and purposeful. I could tell she recognized me even if her mouth did not grin or her eyes widened. I was going to turn away when she spoke. "Dylan," just one word was enough to stop me. The stare was still the same, piercing, silent, and not giving out more than was required. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she said, closing the book and tilting her head as I approached and stood in front of her desk. "The final statement is excellent, and the piece on sin and time has been shared a lot. You write effectively." And I sat down without waiting or inviting him. "You read it all more than once," she added, staring directly at me. "No one suffers alone, but each person chooses how to suffer. You write from anguish, and genuine grief always has its own worth." I kept quiet, feeling as though a barbed wire coil was within my heart. Why is it unpleasant, even though there is no longer hatred? I posed the age-old query, but this time, I don't need your rejection. Sophia stared at me for a while before placing her hands on the table, clasped together as though thinking about something. "I simply want to know what I was actually involved in that scenario." I scowled as a shiver went down my spine. "You are the only one who has ever seen me when I wasn't acting." I believed I could manage everything, including my emotions, but she interrupted me, saying, "But you still filmed it, still released it, still lied, still. However, you truly terrified me, and I was rendered speechless not because you assaulted me." Sophia went on, "Really, I wanted to get even with your father back then." I gazed at her unblinkingly, because I felt glad if I took away what he loved most, because he had deceived me, caused me to lose my first child due to stress, and abandoned me when I needed him most. You were the only one who didn't try to possess me, and I knew that you weren't anything to take, even if it felt like a boulder had been lodged in my neck. I could have stopped, but I chose not to, and when things went out of control, I was unsure of whom to save. So I kept quiet. Nobody said anything. I used to believe I was being controlled, although there was no touching, only the sound of spoons hitting glasses from another table, and soothing jazz music coming from the ceiling speakers. Sophia chuckled gently, almost quietly, and I replied, "But later, I wonder if I could go back to that night. Would I say no?" I would stare at her a bit more before I entered, but I wouldn't say no. Sophia placed the cup on the table, her hands trembling, and she sat there, no longer glamorous, no longer a character, just a human, imperfect, defective, and more nude than ever the woman who had broken my childhood. Not from the cold, but from something she never said out loud, or in tears, regret. Even though there was no ring on it, her fingers were twisting the ring, her eyes were avoiding the light, and her breathing was shallow. "Want me to say, 'I'm sorry'?" I shook my head in response to her question, saying, "No, since I'm the weaker one if an apology makes me feel better. Additionally, it's just another position if nothing changes." She gave a nod as though anticipating it. "You're correct. I remember, but am not sorry." A lengthy quiet. I got to my feet. "After all, did you ever love me?" I said as I walked away from the table. She raised her head. Her eyes gleamed in the window light. Once causing me to become lost, those eyes now have the fatigue of someone who has been burdened for too long. Yes, if love means recognizing that the other person is better than you initially believe. However, no. If love is about wanting that individual to be free, I couldn't truly love you. I gave a nod. No more inquiries. Nothing more is required. I walked out of the store into the soggy January day. My collar was blown into by the wind. I pulled up my scarf to hide what was obscuring my eyes, not to protect myself from the cold. It was a recollection that had just been written down, not tears. Deep, but light. I bought a brown leather notepad in a little bookstore on the way back. The vintage, snap-lock kind. I intend to write everything down, not to share, but to preserve serve as a reminder to myself that I survived this and that I'm still who I am. Does that haunt you? Someone asked me years later. I took a while to respond. After giving them a quick glance, I said that it didn't haunt me. It gave me a boost. How Sophia managed to survive after that is beyond me. She may have married. Perhaps she turned into a decent person. Perhaps she never gave me another thought. However, I was certain that she was no longer in a position to control my narrative. The storm had been her. The small home that didn't close was me. I've learned how to shut now. Just close correctly, without slamming or locking. I appreciate you sticking until the very end. I want to make one point very slowly and very clearly. If you are still sitting there listening to me finish this narrative, with all of my heart, thank you. I am aware that the most valuable item an adult can ever trade is time. And to me, it is a gift if you have listened to a narrative that is partially unclear, partially thorny, and even disagreeable for more than an hour. I don't share my tale to gain forgiveness or to cast blame on others. I share it because certain things, particularly when they start talking in the late afternoon, cannot be held in the heart forever. Anyone who has lived long enough knows that memories tend to turn at that hour. Many of you, who have been betrayed and understand the need of remaining silent to protect oneself or another, will listen to this narrative with emotion and a layer of past memories that you may not have before discussed with anybody. Like all stories, this one has no right or wrong. In the lengthy book of life, it is only a lost life and a question mark. And sometimes it's sufficient to have someone open it up. Thank you once more to those who listen with hearts that are open and warm enough to hear and comprehend, rather than with their ears. I hope you have a calm day. Additionally, if there are memories that cannot be identified, they can still be subtly recorded, much like a letter sent to quiet. Every day the team comes up with unexpected stories.